Ready for the
Do we
holidays?
do a pledge?
Have done it.
Okay. Out of turn. I can't keep up with how we do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the November 18th, 2025 Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. We will be, I don't usually sit in. I'm Melissa Ward, sitting in as chair today for Latilda Hughes Neal. She's our chair and she is unable to attend today. I want to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to introduce again, just in case anybody is not aware, we have a new representative from the Emerald Coast Regional Planning Council, Vicara Dickerson. Vicari, see, I knew I wasn't going to get it right. Miss Dickerson, thank you so much for coming and for helping us out. I'd like to note the staff in the room is Kristen and Donna. Donna, you're new to the planning department. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Day 2, very new, very new. And we have some guests. The first, I don't think I see anybody that's from a particular commission or board in the audience since we only have a few people. So we'll move along. Thank you all for showing up. What do we do from here, Ms. Dickerson? Is there something that we need to do specific? Well, okay. So has everybody read the minutes? Do we have any comments? I did speak with Ms. Dickerson about the minutes, and very briefly on page 2, there was a where it says a 5013C status, community land trust. I would like to have that amended to 501C3 nonprofit status. That's a term for the tax papers. You got to have that in there, and it should say nonprofit afterward. I don't know what a 1023 reference is submitted for 1023.
It's the document.
So could we add the word form in front of 1023, please? And then the only thing, there was another thing. Hang on. That may have been it.
I think you mentioned
There was a motion on the previous approval of the June 17th minutes, but there's no mention of who motioned to approve them and who seconded. Maybe that's just a me thing from, unfortunately, many years of taking minutes at these board meetings. It would be my preference that we have it. If we don't have it, we'll move on, and I'm not worried about that. And there was a statement that I didn't understand. There's a big section that says, what is a land trust? It looks like it came from a slide, which is, I see there's other pictures in here, so maybe it's just demonstrative, but it's not minutes. However, if it doesn't bother anybody else, I don't care if it stays. You prefer? Yeah, and that's fine. It's perfectly fine. That's all the comments that I had, really, because the other one I think is non-essential.
I'd like to make a motion to approve with the changes.
Do I have a second?
I second. Teresa Jones.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is bringing up old business. Stephen Schoen was on the agenda for making a presentation or giving a presentation on the Live Local Act amendments in the last year's session. Mr. Schoen is sick and unable to attend today. He has sent Donna to present? No? To hand out. Day 2, already doing presentations. Donna, this is you, babe.
Oh, I
Oh.
passed it out for her.
Oh, this one pager. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to get up, hand it around. I apologize. So do you guys want to take a minute to look at it and ask any questions? He's not here to answer them.
Madam Chair, I've already got a question about point number 2. With available parking within 600 feet.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Does that mean
If
if
a
you live by Publix, you can park in Publix or something?
Well, as long as it's available to the public, yes. So if a proposal was to come in within a 600-foot walking distance to a parking area that would be considered available to them, then they would be able to utilize that parking for their development. What they would have to do is have a study that shows that there's enough parking at, say, the Publix that would accommodate both the public shopping center, all of its uses, and potentially the residential capacity.
And would this also allow developments along 30A where there's beach access parking to use that as parking?
So I will tell you from a development standpoint, that is not actionable or realizable for Walton County. The public parking, in my opinion, and I won't go as far, the engineer would have to do the study, or the parking analysis would have to be done. But let's say it was down in Gulf Place. If you're familiar with Gulf Place, they are developed, some might say, I would be one, slightly overdeveloped, and they're parking out in right-of-ways and on public parking areas. So if a developer were to come in on a piece of property to put in affordable housing, and he says, we're going to claim this public parking on this beach access, you would have to be able to say, we have enough for the park, and also an overflow that would allow for that use for the affordable housing. That is very difficult. That's a very difficult line to toe for Walton County. We don't have adequate public parking areas. This is really, that particular language is really designed more for the metropolitan areas where they do have walkable transit areas in a close proximity.
I agree with you. I think it's designed for metro areas. I'm just interested why it was included here.
It's not a Walton County thing, it's a statewide thing.
No, it's just, why is it, if it's highlighted here, that's what raised my concern.
Because Stephen was pointing out the largest changes that came out of the new legislation.
Okay.
Not that Walton County's going, yay, we're gonna let them build buildings without parking. He's not saying that at all. I feel confident. Would you say, Kristen? Yeah. He's just like, I can tell you from our conversations, some of this is some of the stuff that came out of the new Live Local is very difficult to pull off in Walton County. It just is.
I'd like to make a comment, and we overlook that there is public transportation coming out of Okaloosa County that terminates down around the Sacred Heart Hospital area. So there are transit stops down there
Yes.
that we overlook.
Well, I would say that the issue is whether or not there's developable land down there for affordable housing that can utilize that transit use. That's the disconnect. But I agree with you.
My point was only about the transportation corridor down there that is under the MPO. Even though we don't know a lot about it sometimes, there is a map, there are stops, and they come in almost to the end of 38 down there.
It would be nice to be able to create a partnership with them in the mobility plans that Walton County is trying to pursue and produce. Did anybody have any other questions or comments on that? Barbara? Yeah, public comment. I apologize. I don't do this regularly.
Barbara Morano. I've been following this since they first dug the hole on 98. And I believe it's still 120% of the AMI, live local.
As
And-
high as 120%, actually 140 in some areas, but yes,
Well,
I know.
we know that that's not going to touch the people we want to touch.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with Mac once, and he said, oh, 80%. I don't know if a local community can change that since it's in state statute.
They cannot. And speaking from the perspective that I do, if a developer comes in and says, we want to do this development and we have proof as to why we should be allowed to do 120%, unless you have factual documented evidence that that is not acceptable, then it is very difficult to turn it down or force them to do 80%. So it's a very difficult position.
Well, I hope, and I know planning's under a lot of changes, so I'll go on the record to say, I hope we can prove that 120% is not going to do that, because all the apartments now are on an equal level, as we know. The Bristol, or I think it's called the Pearl now, which is on 98, excuse me?
Jewel.
The Jewel, excuse me. The Pearl is the Jewel, which in my opinion, it is not. They are not offering anything affordable. So I hope we can prove that we don't need 120%, because we certainly don't need the density without helping people. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other public comments or questions? Hearing none? I don't think we have to make a motion on this. This is just information. Right, okay. The next item on the agenda is, Ms. Dickerson, let's talk about the annual report.
Good morning. So the report draft has already been emailed out. If you haven't received a copy, please let me know and I can get that to you. The main areas that I just wanted to confirm that everyone was on agreement with are on page 3. So the fee waivers for affordable housing, specifically what the advisory was given with Matt Carpenter in regards to his notes. The flexible densities on page 4, and on page 5, the reservation of infrastructure capacity, as well as page 6, the affordable accessory residential units. So we just wanted to make sure, since Matt Carpenter is no longer, that we have up-to-date information as to what you guys would want into the report. And if you have any changes, recommendations, or comments that you want to be added, take away, you can have that to me before the end of the month, so that way I can have it ready for the BOCC to be submitted.
If we send something that we think needs to be modified in that, is that something that we would have to mass distribute so that they could all have input on that? Yeah,
So I
just
have
wanna make sure that's clear.
Like a group email. So everyone who has a voice on these should be in that email. If you're not, please let me know and I can add you to that thread, so that way you're up to date as to what changes want to be added or adjusted.
And this is a report that goes annually to the Board of County Commissioners?
Yes, ma'am.
So next year, starting January, we start looking at what we have to do anything we think needs to be changed as well.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Did you have were you wanting to? Okay. I just wanted to make sure but yeah, so this is everything that we do throughout the year with regards to all of the AHAC meetings and any updates that we want to add. And so this is for this one. We're going to submit it before the board, see if they are in agreement with everything that was suggested or done. And then, like you mentioned, we'll start back up in February with our first meeting with that.
I just wanted a reminder, it's a living document and it continues to upgrade or change as we continue to try to do things and help the board move forward with the strategic plan.
Absolutely.
Does anybody have any comments on the report? Any public comments on the report?
So on page 7, I know we had a lot of discussion about parking, but one of the concerns that I have
making sure that we're not putting pedestrian traffic on the roads. And so, I think it's important to have street parking, but there's also a place for pedestrians. I know we can't mandate that, but worry about street requirements being too narrow to allow parking and a fire truck or emergency vehicle to get down the street. I don't know if that's something to be included in our discussion, or, I know that there's an incentive to try and allow more developable land to be allowed, and not requiring driveways and parking spots on the property allows more land to be developed. But when we're pushing the parking out onto the street, making sure that the streets are wide enough to do that, and trying to keep pedestrians off the street.
That's a good point. Is there a particular, so first let me say that any new residential development is required to have sidewalks. Like if they're doing a subdivision, they're on both sides of the road. If they're doing an apartment complex, they have to have they have to have sidewalks between the road and the apartment building. That's in the code, and it's an ongoing requirement. The roads have minimum widths based on emergency vehicles. That is true. So is there something in here that you wanted updated to make sure of that, or do we want to I understand your point, but my question is, do you want us to revisit this again, say in our next meeting, which is February, where we bring up and look at the streets and see if there's any requirements that need to be modified to make sure that we have pedestrians safe from vehicle traffic?
Yeah, because we might need to just put a sentence in there that acknowledges, right, that parking on the street is not popular, but somehow talk about the safety issue.
Okay.
But this is talking about affordability. I don't know if we have to highlight safety in there. That caught my attention when I reviewed it. I could think about it and see a way to word it. Or,
I mean, we can look at it. I know everybody thinks of the southern part of the, county when you're speaking of street stuff, but I know majority, for instance, for things like that parking aren't, an issue in the rural parts. Affordable housing is actually being developed.
Yeah.
And so, just be aware, I guess, if we're making those recommendations. I mean, for us to put sidewalks, in certain areas would just increase the costs, which would make it harder to develop, affordable housing. So definitely something that we can discuss. But, when we're making these decisions, we really have to think of the entire county and not just the south end where they are having, those type of, issues.
That's a good point, because in the rural area where there are no sidewalks and you're requiring a sidewalk, it would only front the development and goes nowhere.
We're looking at sidewalks, for the project that, those are added costs, associated with the development when you're trying to service 80%. So, just as we're looking through it, I think definitely we can have a discussion about it, but, just keep in mind when you're making those decisions, you're encompassing the entire county. Sidewalks and stuff aren't, per se.
Maybe what we look at in the coming months is whether or not we do need to have language that speaks to rural housing versus the more urban housing, and alternatives where there would be sidewalks that connect to certain things, like if there is a transit area or if there is shopping nearby that they could walk to as opposed to drive a car. But I think in this particular language, what you're respecting to is if you're parking on the streets, and so you have vehicle traffic back and forth and parking on the streets, but no place for the people to walk, because they push that building right up to close as they can, now you're forcing them to walk in the street. And I don't think that's the case in the rural area. So I think we need, maybe what we have is we add into the strategy that we're gonna reevaluate it for a variation based on the location of the housing.
Okay. And similar to what you mentioned before, this report is more so an end of the year wrap up.
Yes.
So adding that to the top of the year's agenda may be better.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
It's a very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment on that? Do we need a motion to move this forward?
Since it's in draft form, I do want to give time for if there still is any notes particular to the Matt Carpenter suggestions, if there are any adjustments there. So it would more so be, I don't think we need one because it's not finalized yet.
Okay.
That would be more so email discussion, following up with everyone to make sure that it's ready before we go to the board.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for your comments. Those were great. We have the next item on the agenda is the discussion of the Housing Summit 2.0 for Walton County.
Thank you.
Hello, committee members. My name is Ryan Mims. I work for the Florida Department of Health in Walton County, but I also facilitate what's known as the Walton Community Health Improvement Partnership, also easier said as WCHIP. 2 weeks ago, we had what was called our Walton Healthy Walton Summit. We did a community health assessment this year, and we do that every 3 years. And out of that, certain priority areas kind of trickle up to the top of things we need to focus on. For the past couple of cycles, affordable housing and living conditions have kind of became a priority for us, as we know, as this committee definitely knows. Grateful for the members of the committee that has been involved in WCHIP in any way. We had a couple of you attend our summit, as well as or other people that couldn't attend, but y'all are definitely tied to WCHIP in some way. Also, May of 2024, we did a housing summit with Okaloosa County. That was a good jumping off point for both of us. Okaloosa just had their Housing Summit 2.0 1st of October. So we think that it's probably time for us to kind of have a conversation more Walton County specific on things we want to focus on strategically, and it probably feeds into the next presentation perfectly. So I'm happy that Ryan McKinless with the Florida Housing was a presenter at our first Housing Summit, and happy he's here today. So that makes sense. I provided you some notes that came up during our discussion of our breakout session during the summit. Things that could be potential focuses during the summit if we have a housing summit. Things that we thought maybe can be discussed more. Okaloosa's Housing Summit was more educational. We feel like ours could be more action planning, more actually developing strategies on how to attack some of these. Of course, Okaloosa has a strategic plan for affordable and attainable housing, and it was mainly facilitated and pulled together by their SHIP coordinator. So happy Fakari is here, and she, of course, is our contracted through the Emerald Coast Region Council, and she was part of our breakout session during our Healthy Walton Summit. So she provided great expertise and great feedback, as well as Teresa, of course. We're thinking about we've decided to start planning it first of the year in January. Kind of pull people together. I kind of listed out a couple people that were during the that was in the breakout session. People that are interested in being part of the steering committee. Of course, more people, totally fine. Those are just the people that we thought or they wanted to be interested in. It'll also hit some of our big kind of essential services with the sheriff's office, as well as Ascension and healthcare. Some of the things we want to focus in on. We kind of put a date out there in May 2026. That's flexible, but the biggest kind of thing the biggest input was not having it in March or April because of spring break. And that usually takes the sheriff's office out of the mix during those months. So we want them to be involved with it, of course. So that was the feedback. Also, I just got word last week that Okaloosa is planning on doing a kind of a regional, not summit, but like educational thing in September. So having it maybe before then, and then having that as a follow-up. They're trying to include us, as well as Santa Rosa and Escambia in that. And it's kind of building off of that missing middle housing piece of it and bringing somebody in to talk more about that. Really would like this committee to help kind of guide what this looks like, the summit looks like, and what the people we bring to the table and how the breakout sessions are. So totally open to feedback and direction. Yeah, anything else that you can think of. This is what kind of our discussion that we had 2 weeks ago. And I'll turn it over to Teresa.
And as we discussed, possibly as the Affordable Housing Committee, bringing this, recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, pulling in, the essential workforces, what do they need for housing? So we talked about, getting the salary data for each of the workforce essential areas that we need. What do we need to build them to keep those qualified employees and employers in the area? So we just felt it was really important to bring all of the community leaders together. So, as a recommendation of the Affordable Housing Committee to, present it to the Board of County Commissioners, just get real, live, factual information and provide out to make those decisions or help guide our LHAP strategies.
So on the list down here, on the steering committee, we don't list the Chamber's Small Business Committee.
Definitely could be part of it. Absolutely. That's great feedback. Gabrielle was there at the summit, but she didn't sit in on our session. And so I think that would be extremely important for the small businesses. Yeah.
Christine Ladwigan, Dunlap and Shipman is the chairperson for that committee, and I'm on the committee, and I'll talk to her about it and see if we can get started.
That'd be great. Any other individuals, or if you would like to be a part of, Melissa, you were part of our original steering committee from the last one, let us know, and we'll make sure we pull those people together. Of course, WCHIP can be a great facilitator of making sure things happen, but we need other individuals leading this in order to make sure it's what we need for Walton County. Any questions?
If I could just ask, just to make sure I'm clear, what is it that we are expecting to accomplish? We're at the summit, we're going to have these focuses so that we can recommend changes to the Board of County Commissioners?
I would think summit? So, or recommendations, to planning. There's legislation that just passed, and Walton County has a lot of churches. So, in God's backyard, Yigby. Am I saying that right, Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yigby passed where, we could, as a committee, make recommendations to incentivize, those churches to build affordable housing on their property. So, bona fide affordable housing projects. So us as a committee can make recommendations to the board and to planning, to look at these projects, for bona fide projects. I was recently at a Florida housing thing, and we are bright green or bright blue, stating that we have the most churches and the most land out of all 67 counties. So, there's opportunities, and that if we can provide the factual data and pull all the people together, we can make meaningful recommendations to our county and our county leaders, to guide those discussions. It can also help us pick, affordable housing strategies. There's multiple strategies that we recommend. Right now, we're just utilizing 3 of them. I feel all 3 are very important for our county, but not to say maybe we shouldn't look at other strategies. So this discussion would help us pinpoint what is it that we need right now and what should we be funding.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can get some, decision makers, elected officials there as well. We had a couple at the original housing summit because it was in Niceville. Several of them, the distance kind of was a barrier to them. So hopefully this will also be an educational, kind of an informational session for them, because housing is very complex and it's overwhelming sometimes, but making sure that the people making the decisions are able to, you recommend, what your ideas are, the strategies and whatnot, making sure they're more informed as well about what works for other places.
The educational portion is big as well. We just had the last Affordable Housing Committee, and, not a lot of people know what a community land trust is. Or, at the Okaloosa Housing Summit, they did an ALICE activity, so just educational for the community as well as what is that ALICE population? It is, that sheriff that is maybe just starting out, and what can they afford? So there's activities just to educate that it's not, people living in a HUD complex. Affordable housing is that, 14-year student aid Walton County School District, employee. It is that assistant manager at Zaxby's. So just to educate the public on what does affordable housing look like, because it's not what a lot of people think it is.
And it's a continuum. So it's Emily Proctor with Caring and Sharing kind of mentioned about steps. Of course, there's the individuals that are in-house homeless, but then there's the people in the middle that, are, single, coming out of college, or working in an entry-level position that, maybe starting a family that just, we need to help support each of the steps and make sure that we have strategies on addressing each of the things, but making sure that those essential people that are, make our community run are supported as much as possible. And have also, at the end of the day, expendable income that can help support making sure there's food on the table, making sure they maybe get a weekend vacation every now and then, because all that impacts health as well. Being able to go to the doctor, making sure that they're, all of that impacts ultimately everything you do and everything our community does impacts somebody's health. And that's kind of, we're facilitating that. We're good pulling people together, people. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there anybody from the public that also would like to speak to it? Looks like you're all together with the same group. Well, thank you very much for that. That was very informative, and I look forward to getting with a few people and asking if they want to be a part of that steering committee or in some way participate, because I'm looking at ideas of how this could improve some of the communication that we have with our council, our commissioners, but also looking at what we have that will change the way things happen, because besides getting them to want to do it, we have to give them options that will help make those things happen. And I do believe that comes in the form of verbiage that they can adopt. And once it's adopted, now we have something to work with. So I do appreciate you bringing that up to us. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
The next item on the agenda is the Florida Housing Coalition presentation by Ryan McKinless from the Florida Housing Coalition. Thank you very much for coming.
Welcome to Walton County. All right. Seems that the Ryans are well represented here today. Happy to follow that up. All right. Good morning. Nice to meet y'all. Some familiar faces, some new faces for me here today. I'm really happy to be here talking with y'all a little bit about some of the housing action planning that we do at the Florida Housing Coalition. So first off, I'll give you guys a brief overview of my background. If you're like, who the heck is this guy coming from Tallahassee? I've worked in affordable housing policy for going on 10 years now. I started off with the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, working in multifamily development, working on the finance side of things, credit underwriting, working with multifamily developments that use low-income housing tax credits, sale program, and then moved over to policy and special programs during the end of my time there. Then I moved over to the Florida Housing Coalition a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure how we're controlling the slides here. Is that, okay, next slide, please. Thank you very much. So a little bit about the Florida Housing Coalition. We're a statewide nonprofit. We don't have a huge staff. We got 20 some odd people, but we're scattered throughout the state. I myself am based in Tallahassee, but we have staff in as close to Walton County as Okaloosa County. And we also have a wide range of backgrounds, as Ryan Mims had said earlier. Affordable housing can be a really complicated thing, and it can involve a lot of different sectors, a lot of different professional sectors, everything from planning, data, legal, and everything in between. So that's just a little bit about us. We also work directly with nonprofits and local governments around the state. So we have a pretty good feel on what the pulse is around the state as far as who's doing what and what the best practices are and what new innovative processes are coming up. Next slide, please. Real quick, just want to thank the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So that's the state HFA, Housing Finance Authority, who I used to work for. We partner with them for the Affordable Housing Catalyst Program. We've been doing that for some time now, and that's what allows us to work directly with local governments such as yourself to be able to come here and do this free of charge. So thank you to FHFC for that. All right, so why do a housing action plan? I'm going to walk through some of the reasons why we feel that these housing action plans have been effective in the places that we've done it, and kind of what sets them apart. Because I think that, naturally, a lot of people, have quite a few plans that come through their community that have to do with housing. So some of y'all might be thinking, what is different about this than, a comp plan or, any of the other things that, you may have done in recent years. So the first thing is database decision making. This is something that has been brought up multiple times here today, and I want to walk you guys through, a hypothetical basic situation and use an example from one of our housing action plans that we've done in the past year out of Sarasota. So on database decision making, say hypothetically, you identify and quantify, the example is you have community members who are hearing that teachers, restaurant servers, nurses, and other local workers can't afford to live in the community. Our housing action plan would do a deep dive on data on wage levels and wage growth, taking a look at what's affordable as far as rent for those workers in those sectors compared to market rents and prices for that area. Different areas of the state are obviously, Florida has many different markets, right? So Walton's going to be a lot different than, we've done housing action plans for Sarasota, Collier County, Marion County, just to name a few, and all of those situations are going to be very different. So we would take a deep data dive on wages specific to Walton County. And this will help to identify the affordability levels, right? That solutions and strategies need to be tailored towards for the workers in your area. So on the next slide, have an example, again, from our Sarasota work that we've done recently and our findings there. We have a really great data analyst on staff, Wiz Benoit. Both him and myself work deep in the data side of things. And what we found in Sarasota County was that nearly 70% of local workers made at or below 80% AMI. So what we found, whether it's Sarasota or any of the other places we've done these housing action plans, is that this does move the needle, both in terms of public perception and then, local elected officials when you're really showing, the people that are behind these AMI levels, because I think that housing data and data in general can be like really up in the sky and nobody really knows what you're talking about when you're saying AMI over and over again. It doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. So when you're able to actually tie the professions in the area to these AMI levels, you're able to show people, hey, we need housing that's affordable at these levels. This is where the need is at for our area, and being able to tailor it towards that. So on the next slide, we have a guided growth example. So our data isn't limited to just, wage and population and things like that. It's also related to how communities should plan their affordable housing growth, right? Because it shouldn't be a random process. Obviously, you want to get all the affordable housing you can get where you can get it, but it should also be an educated process, right? You want to know where jobs are, where people are living, how people are commuting, and the flows of people within your community. And I think that Walton County is a really interesting example of that, right? What I know about Walton County is that the inter-county and, from other counties coming in and out for work, it's an interesting place as far as how people are migrating here. And I think that what a housing action plan would do here is it would try to get, down to the roots of how people are moving around here from a, data-driven perspective that can be backed up by numbers. So this example here, this is from Wiz Benoit on our team. He does a really great job, does great work. the blue, so that's a high score, so that means it's closer to amenities and farther from disamenities, right? You know, in general, you want people living closer to where community-based services are, right? You don't want to build a 150 unit affordable housing complex that isn't near anywhere you can buy food or schools or any of these other community-based services, hospitals, pharmacies. You know, realistically, people who are living in affordable or workforce housing, or whatever term you want to give to it, anybody wants to live next to, you know, or in reasonable proximity to some of these things that, you know, that make life, you know, easy and good. So the red areas, obviously, it's a low score. And all this does is it informs, it's part of the housing action plan, and it informs, hey, you know, if you're going to make certain decisions on where you want to incentivize affordable housing development, you know, we're giving you kind of a roadmap to, like, here's some good areas that it would really just frankly make sense for housing to be. Next slide, please. All right, so another hypothetical for why housing action plans we feel are impactful. Aligning local efforts, so ensuring strategies account for analysis, planning, and actions that have already happened or are currently underway. So an example here is a local housing department is interested in strategies that accomplish more with SHIP dollars, right? The SHIP program. Planning staff is analyzing more zoning allowances for ADUs and small townhomes. This is a hot topic at the state level and at the local level and at the national level for that, ADUs and small townhome allowances. One thing that we can do through these housing action plans is kind of bridge together interdepartmental engagement, and that's not to say that, you know, departments here in Walton County don't coordinate well, and it's not to say that Walton County and the municipalities within Walton County don't communicate well. It's just it's trying to find out where different departments and different municipalities can get together and you know, kind of synthesize what they're working on, because I think it's natural that folks can be working in silos and not really even know that they are. Even if they have great relationships with people, you can get kind of lost in what you're working on at a given time and not have any idea what, you know, the next town over is doing, even though they're trying to do the exact same thing as you. So part of the work that we do with these housing action plans is that we do provide engagement opportunities with the public sectors. So another thing we can do here as far as the SHIP program goes is we can, you know, we're talking here about annual action plans, LHAPs, right? Local housing assistance plans. We can, you know, we can gauge what is going on, what strategies are in place, so that we can better guide where strategies can evolve and get better. The third example we have here is activating people who will power the strategies. Excuse me. So Walton County, you know, just from some of the folks in this room, and you're serving on the AHAC here. So you know, people yourselves are the ones who, you know, make this happen. Education's a huge aspect of that. You know, as it was said earlier, housing can be a complicated thing. It can make people's eyes glaze over, as I'm sure I'm probably doing right now. But one thing that we want to do is we want to instill pathways to act. So an example here is a local housing department has heard of other communities that have a local affordable housing trust fund, right, to support affordable housing, but is unsure of the local desire to do the same. So obviously buy-in is huge if you want to do an affordable housing trust fund or something of that nature, right? So we can assist with, you know, helping to form a process to engage community members. That includes elected officials, developers, nonprofits, people who provide services. That's a huge aspect of this. Planners, to educate on the need for why funding should be flexible, and also point to successful examples of affordable housing trust funds. You know, just offhand, you know, part of my job as a policy analyst is I take a look at local programs, local policies from around the state all the time. It's all I do. I am looking at who's doing what where and what the new things are. And that's at the state level, it's at the national level. So at the state level, you know, recently we did a comprehensive review of every local housing assistance plan in the entire state of Florida. We have pretty good radar as far as what's going on where. And we can, you know, help provide kind of a roadmap for local government staff to say, like, hey, you know, this local government in Florida has a similar situation to you, not just from a political perspective or, anything like that, but from a population perspective, from an industry perspective, and this is what they did to get an affordable housing trust fund. So this is a path that you all can follow because fill in the blank county, fill in the blank city did it, and it was successful a couple of years ago. So that's just another example. The next slide here, this is one we like to throw in there. I don't think people realize just how many, well, maybe in this room, because I'm talking to DayHack, but I don't think a lot of people realize just how many stakeholders there are that really have an effect on housing. And we call it a housing ecosystem, but, really that's just to say that, there's a web of stakeholders in any community that are really essential to making affordable housing a reality. So nonprofit builders, right? Service providers, like I just said, philanthropy. Philanthropy is a huge aspect that people don't really delve into enough, in my opinion, when it comes to housing. I think that a lot of communities here, and offhand for Walton, I'm not sure what the situation is. I would know if I dove into it, but in our past housing action plans, we were able to find that there are philanthropic organizations that are based in a lot of communities in Florida that have an interest in affordable housing, have some dollars and can really make an impact, but they are not sure how to get in the game. Business leaders, right? So that's a huge aspect of this as well. I'm sure Walton has local businesses that have employees that are struggling with housing costs. Get them in the game. Public sector, obviously, faith-based groups. We're talking about YIGB, Yes in God's Backyard. That's a really natural fit for affordable housing. Churches have land, they have resources, and they have congregants who are, also facing housing challenges. It's a natural fit, in my opinion. Real estate professionals, it goes on and on. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but that's something that we try to get at in these housing action plans, is trying to navigate this ecosystem, all these stakeholders, into trying to make a patchwork of how this can work together. So another example here, I think I'm getting close to the end, but another example here as to why the housing action plans we think are effective is it establishes specific actionable strategies. So the who, what, when, where, and how much money, almost most importantly. So an example here is there's widespread support for a community land trust, right, a CLT, but more information is needed on how to set one up successfully. So this is something we've done in the past with some of our other housing action plans. We can include an implementation component for priority strategies that specify stakeholders to involve in establishing a CLT, how much funding you should have as a goal to help start up, that seed funding for a CLT, how you make sure you have continued operations from a legal perspective, having those mechanisms in place. On staff we have attorneys and land use specialists who are in deep and are frankly, the best at what they do when it comes to community land trusts and when it comes to using land for affordable housing from a legal perspective and setting it up for the future. Because, community land trust is a forward-thinking concept for affordable housing. It's in perpetuity, as they say. It's 99 years. It's making sure that no matter what happens, that affordability stays in place for the long term. So that's something else that we get into with these. The next slide here, in general, like I said before, every community is different, right? Walton's going to be different than any other community we've worked with. But in general, we have these 4 buckets, so to say, of local policy tools that we factor into these housing action plans. So all the housing action plans that we do, in some way, shape, or form, tackle each of these 4 buckets. So funding, zoning and land use, public land, and strategic partnerships. So all of what I've been saying this whole time, and you can see some of the sub bullets there for each of these that give you a better idea of what I'm talking about with each of these buckets. But in all the work that we do, it really comes down to funding, zoning, land use, public land, and strategic partnerships. So for Walton County, it would obviously look different than any other plans that we've done. But in general, what we're going to get into is these 4 topics to try to set up a roadmap for Walton County. And that's just to give you all an idea. So similar to that, the structure of these plans, right? Just kind of a brief review of what I've been talking about so far. So data and trends analysis, demographic, economic housing stock, even factoring in resiliency, right? For, Walton's close to the Gulf, and resiliency is a huge aspect of planning and affordable housing. That's something else that we factor in these plans as well. plan and policy review, right? That's kind of my side of things, taking a look at, you know, what's on the books, what other people are doing, and what would make sense to change or evolve here potentially, or make a little bit stronger. Stakeholder engagement, something that we do, and as part of these housing action plans, is, you know, we try to be in the field with you. We try to support these efforts with you. So, you know, for the other housing action plans we've done throughout the state, like I said, we have staff all over the state and we do travel. So, you know, we try to get into your community and help with the stakeholder engagement piece. We'll come and talk to, you know, your chambers of commerce. We'll come and talk to your local elected officials. We'll conduct surveys of these different stakeholder groups to say, you know, to see what people are experiencing and what their, you know, their pressure points are, what their interests are. That's something that I've done personally in the past with some of these housing action plans. We make a comprehensive list of people to reach out to with informal surveys and see if they're interested in an interview. And then we get those interviews and we bridge gaps that way. We get quotes from people, we get their perspectives, and we're able to bridge people together that way. And find out exactly what they need. And we also workshop as well. Strategy, so prioritization, implementation, right? You know, it's fine and dandy if, you know, a housing action plan is this cool, pretty thing sitting on a shelf, but part of it is at the back end of it. We want to make sure that we are a resource to you all to make sure that this is really put into action. So again, like I said before, we try to give you a roadmap to implement, but, you know, it goes beyond that. We're happy to come on the back end and, you know, provide support in person to make sure that, you know, things get across the finish line, at least do what we can to help in that regard. So the next slide here, I think this is just about the end. So housing comprehensive plan as a housing action plan. So this is kind of a comparison of, like I said earlier, comp plans. You know, they touch on some of these things, but I think that the housing action plans go a little bit further and cover areas that comprehensive plans just don't cover, or they don't get as deep as they could. So that's just an overview of the, you know, compare and contrast between, you know, a comp plan and a housing action plan and what's the differences. So I think that's it. The last slide there, you got the contact information for Ali Inkdovich. She was supposed to be here today, and I was able to fill in for her. She is a technical advisor at the coalition. She has a planning background. She's an AICP. And then myself, you have our emails there, and I'll stick around, of course, if you guys have any questions. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you all sitting through my spiel there. You bet. Great question. So I think that, you know, we work with the community as far as timelines. Say if, like, you know, you are hearing from your elected officials that they want something done within a certain time frame, you know, we try to factor that in. But I'd say in general, in my experience in the housing action plans I've worked on, I'd say 3 to 4 months, typically.
A lot lower than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, not quite. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So typically it's in the ballpark of $50,000.
DPZ first contract was around $80,000 to $90,000. It went up because they modified their analysis and reporting. So, and it was well over 18 months. So that's why I was saying, oh, that's fantastic. I'm very excited to hear 4 to 6 months. I was like, 6 months would have been like a win-win-win. But
yeah, sure.
Yes, absolutely.
There we go. So my question was about the intersectionality between the housing action plan and the community or the county city development with regards to amenities in the red zones. Because when I was looking at your example, it looked like a lot of the blue zones were more towards the urban areas, whereas the red zones tend to be the rural areas. So with that in mind, is there data or has there been any examples where you have maybe started in the blue zones, and then those cities or those counties have now built out into the red zones to accommodate for affordable housing.
Yeah, no, so that's a really good question. I think the best example of that is probably Marion County, so the Ocala area, the housing action plan that we did there. So the ones that I've worked on the past couple of years, it's kind of tough because to gauge effectiveness because the results haven't the wins haven't been in place long enough to really gauge the results, if that makes any sense. But in Marion County, that happened in 2022, so we have a pretty good idea. We're able to zoom out and see how that went. In Marion County, that was a big crux of the work that we did there was the, amenities versus disamenities, more rural areas versus more urban areas, like Ocala, and then the more rural areas outside of Ocala. And that's to say that in general, affordable housing is typically recommended close to urban areas, and that's just naturally because that's where the services are in close proximity to. But that's not to say that, in Marion County, for example, we had affordable housing built in rural areas. It's not like a black and white thing. I think, like, not to be like cheesy or anything, but there's shades to it, right? So there's some nuance to it. So we definitely have examples in Marion County of housing being built in more rural areas. It's not to say that we're coming in and saying don't build housing in rural areas. We're just trying to say here is where it makes sense to build housing, and rural areas can be close to major roads and areas of transportation, right? So I think that's kind of the happy middle ground, so to say, with rural housing is that, I'm not a planner, Melissa is, but in general, housing in rural areas, if it's close to a major roadway, you can be in good shape. It's really just making sure that people can access what they need to access.
So since it was brought up about the DPZ study, one of the things that they promoted and that we are looking at in Walton County is the adoption of a phrase that is trending high right now, which is placemaking. And the rural areas, some of them, they are using farmland TDRs, transfer of development rights, to conserve the farmland and transfer those rights to other less farmy areas but are still rural, where you can then create the mixed use that has both jobs and residential, that is a middle and upper, and then some affordable housing, right? So the idea on the concept of planning is that you create small townships that support themselves. Right. If you can put them near the major thoroughfares, I-10, 20, and 331 that go through there, and 90 on the north end, then you create the ability that should they decide, should we get transit, expand our transit, and then have that, they can still walk to the jobs in those communities. They can move to a place where they can afford it and still have a job to help support them as they progress through that, as we talked about earlier, journey from one level to the next in their affordable housing journey. I 100% agree with that. So my question that follows up that is, in the analysis, since we have the DPZ study, I would assume that you would use that, take that in and absorb it and analyze it in conjunction with our housing numbers. We have back up and say Florida did a study in 2024 where it showed that more than 50% of the people who live in Walton County, for this one section, who live in Walton County, leave and work somewhere else. And we know for a fact, we just did a presentation from the Planning Commission that Freeport has grown 5% every year for the last close to 10 years for residential capacity, but not for commercial capacity. We need more commerce to support the people coming to the area. But we also know that a lot of people that are coming here because they used to vacation here, and it's a really great place to retire. So we have this strange dichotomy that not everybody has. For instance, South Florida has a much higher living, working, being moms with kids, family of 4, that sort of thing environment. We have less of that because it's, because of what we have. We're a coastal community that has a resort on the south side and farming on the north side, and we're trying to figure out where we fit in between all of that. So, that was a very good answer and a very good presentation. Thank you for that question. It's it's appropriate to ask. And we want to ask more questions, but I don't know where we are with that. Thank you for that. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for coming. Does
Absolutely.
anybody else have any questions? No.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time.
My only last question is do we have those slides? Are we able to get a copy of the slides? I like to look at the information.
Absolutely. No, yeah, I can shoot that over. Cool. Yeah, and I'll say really quick to, your last comment, I think that, forward thinking about mixed use development is really important, especially for a Walton County, like all the reasons you're laying out there. And in the past, I keep bringing up the Sarasota example, but I think that Sarasota was really fascinating to me because we were looking at some of the same issues of people, like migration within the county and just outside the county, and where families are getting priced out of and where they're driving to work every day. And that's something that from a data perspective, we're getting at in these reports. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you. Thank you
all.
very much. One thing I would say is we hired an individual who's a planner in our office. She's my assistant. She's got a house in Destin because she could afford a house in Destin, but she can't in Walton County. And now she's looking to move to Walton County. So she's looking at Holmes County to live. That's not acceptable to me. And I know how hard it is for everybody here. We all have the same problem. So I appreciate you speaking to us today. That is the last thing that we have on our agenda except for public comments. Does anybody have anything that they want to bring up, or anybody on the board that has a topic that we need to bring up at our next meeting? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I feel like I've gotten up here like 3 times already, but I just wanted to update the committee on the status of the SHIP waiting list. So for Walton, Holmes, and Washington County, they are officially closed at the moment. Reason being is I've been here about 4 months, and so in coming in, I noticed that there was just no way for us to get through all of the waiting list and successfully accommodate all of the families that were already on the waiting list as we continue to keep building on the waiting list. So I had to make a decision to have a stopping point. With that in mind, what I did was, once we had a stopping point on the waiting list, I sent out a letter campaign first to those who are already currently on the waiting list to see if the interest was still there. With that, I can say it sounds terrible to be excited that the waiting list has decreased with that, but the waiting list has decreased for various reasons. So people either no longer live within the region. Unfortunately, people may have been deceased, or they no longer qualify. So with that in mind, the next round is those who have expressed interest. I will be doing a pre-qualification. So I will be contacting all of those households just to make sure that they do indeed still qualify, even though they are on the waiting list, and hopefully that will further decrease. With the first round, we were able to go from about, in Walton County specifically, I think we were over 60 households. We are now down to about 30, which is great because we'll be able to help more in a shorter time period. Prior to cutting the waiting list, I think there were some people who had been on the list for about 5, almost 8 years. And so what I'm hoping with this cutting of the waiting list is that I will be able to decrease the waiting list, be able to get through the waiting list, hopefully within the next 3 years. That is my number, just personal achievement. But if I can get with 3 years, but less than 5, that is my hope. Then going back to revisit to open up the waiting list so that way we can accommodate a number of 20 or less. I think that if we can keep the waiting list no higher than 20, we'll be able to service within the 3-year time limit that we give to expend the funds. But if we continue to keep a waiting list open and we already have 60 households on there and it continues to grow, we will never make a dent in that. So that was the reason behind the decision. I know I emailed Kristen and Steven, and they are already abreast to that, but I did want to let the committee know, so that way if you are getting contacts and they're saying, well, they said the waiting list is closed, there is a reason why, and unfortunately I do have to do that in order for us to even make any type of progress to get through what the previous waiting list was at.
Thank you for that.
Bakari, I have a question for you. When can we expect the SHIP budget for 2026?
Yes, so technically that's already been released, but those funds have already been essentially promised to those who are on the waiting list. What I'm currently doing is just making sure that the next round, so we usually, on average, depending on what the need is, can serve anywhere between 2 to 7 households per year. And that's if we have to decide if someone is getting a replacement or if we're doing rehab. Well, I've had conversations with Teresa, so she's aware. But what I've also noticed is that in the past, there may have been families given rehab where they maybe did need a replacement just to sort of hold them over. And I don't think that that's necessarily the best solution, which is why I wanted to pause the waiting list and then sort of work through it, because I personally would rather give a replacement and just service the 2 families that we can for that year than to slap Band-Aids on open wounds. So with that being said, the budget has already been released, but it is essentially already promised, if that makes any sense. So it's already ready to be spent for the next round of individuals. I just have to make sure that those individuals qualify.
So for example, for that, if somebody comes in and maybe they needed a roof, they slapped a roof on, but maybe there was other things inside the house. So essentially it was like you, for lack of a better words, like wasted, money putting a roof on when really, for a little bit more you could, of the funding actually put a new household and make it a permanent and lasting impact than putting a Band-Aid on a.
And I will say, I'm a researcher by nature. So when I've done my background research, I think with the new changes in sort of like the accessory dwelling units, for example, or even smaller townhomes or things of that, I think some of those options maybe should have been presented in the past and they just probably weren't considered. But I think if we're a little bit more creative, we can make the funding spread a little further. So for example, I was looking into, I think last year's report, and we had a family of 6 be delegated a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Great. But there's like a family of 2. They don't need, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Maybe we could have done a 2-1, and that way we could have maybe done 2 replacements or 3 replacements instead of just, 1 or 2. And so I think I understand what they were doing in the past, and it is similar to what the word is. I think the word of the day is complex or complexity. It is complex with SHIP because we have different regulations than maybe like a HUD, for example, with regards to with our building. It doesn't necessarily have to meet code. It's more, we just need to make sure that they have somewhere to stay. But in my opinion, I think I would rather make sure that if you have somewhere to stay, it's not, okay, I'm going to be here and then maybe in another year or 2, you're calling to get SHIP again because something else is falling apart. I would rather just solve the problem right then and there and then move on to the next household. So that way we're not revisiting the same family every 2 years, because that's another thing that's happening is one family will contact for a rehab because they know they got it last year, and then they're coming back, well, now this is a problem, this is a problem. We can just attack everything at once. And so there is some flexibility to where if there is more than one item needing to be addressed, we could do that at the same time as well. But I just think having the number of households that were on the waiting list, it's exhaustive. And what was taking place, or my assumption as to what was taking place, is they were just trying to get through the waiting list and serve as many families as they could, versus just recognizing like maybe we need to pause for a second and just make sure that those who we are serving, we're serving them to the fullest capacity, even if that means maybe telling people no, not yet, or not right now.
That is complex, and I appreciate you going through that. That's a lot, and we, Walton County needs some deep dives in what we do for people. Growing up here, I know that there are people that became dependent on services because they don't make enough to plan for future events, and because of that, those services then become a pattern for 6 or 8 people. That's what they do. That's part of their financing.
Yes.
So,
There
yeah,
are some things, like I do have some strategies in place where if you have been awarded SHIP within the past 3 years, that you may have to wait. That is also within the SHIP manual, I believe. So we do have some authority over that. What I would like to see is definitely, or based on my math, if we can keep the waiting list at 20 households or less, we could serve more families quicker. And it would absolutely be more intentional with that help, where we're not just doing a roof and moving on, but they need a replacement, we can do that. And we can actually make sure that they have an adequate replacement. And depending on family size, income, ADA, things of that nature, we're able to adjust as necessary.
thank you for that. Just as a follow-up to her question, because she asked for the budget, could we just get the representation of the budget sent, even though we know that it's, if you
Yeah,
could just,
certainly.
the next meeting or emailed out or something?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Anybody on the board have any other statements or concerns? Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Yay. I want to thank you guys. It's been a great year, and I really appreciate it. And I just want to say that because we're not going to see each other till next year. So happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you next year. I think the meeting is adjourned. Do we need a motion? It's over.
I'm doing well, buddy. I didn't have an opportunity to bring you about the other day. I've made contact with HUD. They want a date that we can sit down and talk about.
Huh? Yeah.
With
Yeah.
another agency. And,
Yes, thank you. Claire, I'm glad you came